Well, as you well know, the discussion, the debate wasn't completed today. We did part of the interventions from member states and then had to end for the day, and then, we'll be returned tomorrow. I was quite gratified by the fact that a very large number of countries have inscribed to speak on this subject, because my view is that the more countries take interest in the situation in the Islamic Republic of Iran, the bigger the chances are that things will move in a positive direction. So I was very happy that many had spoken in support of the calls I had made in my report, and I am happy that it was well received by nearly all the countries who spoke in the debate today. Well, you heard the president's statement. What he said was that personal attacks on special rapporteurs are not something that is good, because it actually attacks or undermines the very institution of special procedures. So therefore, the UN Member States Human Rights Council does not look with favor upon personal attacks on mandate holders. Uh, the statement made by Mr. Larjani was quite clear in terms of it being heard by everybody, and it was also distributed in writing to the delegations. And coming up to this, there have been widespread media reports of attacks by him. I've read in the news wires what he said before he left Tehran for this meeting. So I think, in addition to what was said today and this week, and also other reported reactions from senior Iranian government functionaries, they seem to have preferred to attack me rather than to look at substance of what I have said. And therefore, once you attack the person, then you actually overlook the substance of what was said. And here the mandate is about addressing issues in Iran, and therefore that's the reason why attacking mandate holders personally is seen with disfavor, because the work at hand is then not looked at. Well, where sanctions do not hurt the general population, I think they tend to achieve their objects better. It is customary for human rights promoters to identify in countries where there are serious violations people who are called perpetrators. So, identifying human rights violators and then targeting them for what is called targeted sanctions. In other words, sanctions that impede their freedom to travel outside the country, for example, or their personal situation, is very different from sanctions that can have impact on the country's general population. So when a country does have human rights problems, and if there are identified, proven perpetrators, then there is strong support, in the world for sanctions that target such perpetrators. Well, let me say this. In my discussions with Iranians, both those who belong to the government, those of the NGO communities which are either funded or supported by the government or support the government, and others who have issues with the government, I've noticed a very clear demarcation in that the victims of human rights violations and those who are government's critics, they are far more concerned about sanctions and the impact than have the government been. Except, of course, today the government made a huge issue out of my position on the sanctions. So I think people will welcome, human rights victims will welcome sanctions that target clearly identified perpetrators. Of course, the issue here is the perpetrators must be clearly identified, and of course that it should be imposed on people who are clearly beyond reasonable doubt, shown to be engaged in human rights violations. Well, I think listening to the speech, the issue that the delegation of Iran raised was that I had not, mentioned by name US or EU sanctions. Now, from my vantage point, what matters is not who imposes the sanctions, but the impact of the sanctions. My concern is with whether or not impacts have an adverse effect on the ground. The source of the sanctions, whether it is from the Security Council, General Assembly, or a member state, that is not the primary concern for me. My concern is whether or not sanctions adversely affect the people's fundamental rights. And when I speak of general sanctions, I think anyone who reads that phrase will understand Security Council sanctions are not general. They are focused on certain sectors. The general sanctions have come from other countries. So I do not know what the real issue is. My concern really is to see if I can find out what the impact of sanctions on the people are. And for that, I really need the cooperation of the government of Iran to establish the facts, because they are the people who have the facts, the most amount of facts relevant to knowing the impact of sanctions. Well, I'm sure terminology is important, but I think far more important actually is to look at the issues, allegations made. Of course, I stand by the terms I have used. I in fact account for them in the reports I have submitted. But I think in Iran's case, we have to go beyond nomenclature. We have to look at the real issues. People are suffering. Like today I mentioned 5 Ahwazi Arabs who are facing imminent execution because they had set up a cultural institute. Now to debate for the next 10 months whether they should be called Ahwazi Arabs or not is missing the point entirely, because life is at stake. Everybody has a right to life, and it should not be taken except under very clear and strict circumstances. And I put to you that imposing death penalty on cultural activities is entirely against international law. So I think while proper nomenclature helps, perhaps we will never agree on some of the nomenclature, but far more important is look at substance of the issue, because the ultimate obligation of the state is to defend the fundamental rights of the people, and I think nomenclature and things are far less important than addressing the serious issues out there. If the issue is about my use of the terms widespread, systematic, and systemic, I do defend them, in fact, in my presentation today. The violations are widespread because the allegations I've come across come from all quarters of all walks of life, all parts of the country, all manner of offenders, and in all sorts of circumstances. Torture is just so widespread in the country. I say this is systematic because there's a pattern to the kinds of testimonies that have been established, and such patterns cannot come if they were random occurrences, but have to be part of a much more deeper pattern, and therefore is systematic. I say systemic because these violations I have observed occur across a number of branches of the state, in the provinces, in the capital, and also across a whole body of government institutions. So I do stand by my terms, widespread, systemic, and systematic. I know for a country this is a fairly substantial allegation. All the more reason why they should actually look into this and see how they can address the issues that have been raised. Well, you can discuss what a regime is and what a democracy is. And if you have a very healthy society, civil society, then you would not call that country as having a regime. Regimes are usually terms associated with states in which there's very poor civil society. But I do not use the term regime in my report. Well, there are a number of reasons why I do so. I'll just mention 3 here. One is under Article 25 of ICCPR, Iran is obligated to ensure that elections are free and fair and open to participation by everybody who wants to participate or seek public office. And there are serious limitations on that realization of that article in the current situation, and this is best demonstrated by the continued detention of Mr. Mousavi and Mr. Karoubi. That's one. The other is the fact that there is going to be imminent elections in Iran in June this year, necessarily brings focus on that when there have been issues from the previous elections still unresolved, such as detentions of the people I mentioned, as well as a recent spate of arrests that demonstrate the space for free expression, the space for public exchanges of views is narrowing to a level that you could not actually have a healthy, free and fair election in the circumstances. A third reason is the way countries achieve lasting peace, durable stability, and resolve their political issues peacefully and harmoniously is allowing people to put forward views, have contests, have people choose. The people have a right to choose their future, and that's at the heart of a democracy, at the heart of long-term stability. And if anyone really cares about the Iranian people and their future, they have to really focus attention on the people being able to make a choice of their own free will, and that is through free and fair elections. And therefore, the reason why I'm focusing on this subject is because the broader aspects of human rights in Iran cannot be resolved until people have been able to choose their representatives in a free and fair manner. Elections must be both free and fair and seen to be free and fair. Now, the complaints that I have received from people are that, or they believe at least, the state takes a partisan view towards candidates in an election. Now, this allegation was at the heart of the troubles that came out 3 and 4 years ago. The view that there were certain favored candidates and that their election was perhaps an outcome that may have been engineered, which some people believed was the case. So what I'm saying is elections are best conducted by independent institutions which can be free from either influence, intimidation, or pressure from state authorities. Governments, by their nature, always seek to extend their influence. I think it's the nature of politics for people to use as much I suppose, space they can gain. And the only reason why you have free and fair contests is because people need to negotiate the space they have for them through independent institutions. So you cannot have free and fair elections until you had elections commission that was free and fair, which would ensure that all candidates have a level playing field, and they can all have their views put forward in an equal manner, and people therefore are able to choose without fear or favor in terms of their preferred choice. No, it doesn't necessarily have to be a UN commission. I am in favor, ideally, of homegrown solutions. Countries that can best put forward homegrown solutions have the most durable, if you like, political stability. So Iran should consider, in a very rapid time frame, how they can meet that requirement through domestic arrangements. But when this cannot be done, it is very helpful to have transparency. It's very helpful to have elections observations. Now it's a quite common practice in many parts of the world that elections observations be open to international community, because that will again strengthen public confidence in the process. And if you don't have public confidence in the process, even the best outcome may still not be sufficient for ensuring long-term peace. Well, if you look at logic is something people have to use, and abstract thought is something also people have to use. If you see at past elections, you see a clear pattern emerging. And I am not predicting the future. I am speaking of what is happening right now. Now, a year ago, when Iran had elections to the parliament, we also a pattern whereby the space for public speech was suddenly limited. Journalists and bloggers felt they were targeted, and there was, if you like, a flight of people who would have contributed to a free and fair election through communicating views of candidates. So likewise again, this year began in January, within a week, with the arrest of 17 journalists. And in fact, the allegation against them was that they were communicating with international news media outlets and human rights organizations. So you can see again a worrying trend that by the time elections really get into full swing, if journalists feel that they cannot legitimately practice their profession, then the people lose the chance to know the candidates. And really, one of the fundamentals of a free and fair election, that is media freedom, freedom of expression, assembly, those rights disappear. So I am not predicting the future. I am stating what's happening right now and simply recalling patterns in the past with the hope that they can be avoided. Nobody is going to say what happened in Iran 3 years ago was for the good of the country. It was bad for everybody. And I think it's everybody's interest to avoid the kind of troubles that followed on elections 3 years ago. And the way to do that is to ensure that elections are free and fair, and people feel they were able to freely participate in public life, and therefore you avoid the obstacles that are standing in their way. The fact that there have been statements made by senior Iranian authorities that certain prospective candidates may not be able to contest unless they made certain met certain conditions which were not necessarily linked to free election, exposes me to the view that the elections may not be free and fair. And the fact the Guardian Council can, as in the past, veto candidates on grounds that may not fall into the category of reasonable grounds as identified by the Human Rights Committee is again cause for concern. So there are so many obstacles in Iran towards a free and fair election that one doesn't need to read the tea leaves to say, something may go wrong. But I'm simply expressing my concerns on what has happened yesterday, the day before, the previous year, at the same time that pattern being repeated today as we speak. Well, I have sent over 30, perhaps 35 communications since I began the mandate, asking for detailed information, giving the government opportunity to convey their perspective on credible allegations that have come to me. And I have done this not in isolation, but in partnership with a number of other thematic rapporteurs. So therefore, there is widespread concern among the special procedures that on these issues, Iran needs to explain itself. But I only received 8 replies, and these have also been rather insufficient, only confirming the facts as presented to them, and therefore not offering an alternative perspective or even moving to address the situation that has been pointed out to them. So, I am doing all I can to seek Iran's cooperation and engagement, to hear their views, to consult their documents, and then to present their views as well. I met with the government delegation last Friday in Geneva, and I thought I had a fairly helpful discussion with them, a 2-hour discussion which went through a number of issues that were in the report, and one in which the government suggested that we could move in a step-by-step engagement process, a stage-by-stage cooperation process, which I hope, if it doesn't compromise the mandate, if it doesn't compromise my working methods, is something I can use. But to be able to say that, I need to know that I can carry out my work without compromising its integrity and its totality of concern for human rights in Iran. I have twice asked the government to give me, invitation to visit the country. I have always sought meetings with the ambassadors in New York and Geneva when I'm there, and I have always sought engagement with them. So I do not really know what more I could do to seek their cooperation, because cooperation is a two-way process. I have written letters, I have asked for meetings, I've asked for visits. If they say yes to these, then I think cooperation becomes a fact. This I list in my reports. The allegations I read in the press were that some of them were given additional, if you like, penalties for having allegedly spoken to me or communicated to me. I am not confirming one way or the other whether they did these things, but the allegations against them was that. And Iran's response is that these punishments were taken up by a judicial process doesn't really exonerate the fact that people have been punished for allegedly talking to me, which shouldn't have happened. The people whose names have been put in the press for allegedly talking to me and facing a sanction for this are included in my report. They are about 5 prisoners in Oromia and a few others elsewhere who the government thought had communicated to me. Well, I am not new in facing this hurdle. I am the 4th rapporteur to Iran, and my predecessors had similar difficulties in getting access to Iran, although 2 of them did, I think, each of them one visit. But that's after over, I think, some 20 years of the mandate being there. So the record of cooperation from Iran isn't that significant. The other is, you heard Mr. Larijani say in New York last year that he gave 2 reasons for not giving me an invitation. One was the fact that I was raising too many cases which may not be properly addressed in a visit of a fortnight, which is the normal practice of UN mandate holders. The other was that he said he was worried that I might go to Iran and say things were actually far worse than I thought they were. So I think there is no real reason why they should withhold invitations to me, except the fact that the practice of Iran has been not to grant access to rapporteurs, as do some other countries. North Korea has never given invitation to the mandate holder to visit the country. I think all other countries have given limited access, but some countries like Iran and North Korea have a lot of difficulty granting access to mandate holders. Well, I have not yet made a visit to Turkey. I haven't proposed dates to go to Turkey. I hope to be able to find a convenient time for the government of Turkey to receive me. But I've had no difficulties getting information from Iranians living in Turkey. None of them report reprisals for having spoken to me, unlike the allegations coming out of Iran. So there really is no issue with Turkey in terms of being able to access information from Iranians living there. Well, tomorrow perhaps is not the date for the vote. I think it is later in the month, towards the end of the session. If you look at the statements made today in the debate, it looks like the numbers are there for a continuation of the mandate. And that's primarily because the issues in Iran are quite serious and requires attention. I just mentioned to you about North Korea and Iran. Unlike North Korea, Iran is seen as a leader in the global south. It is currently chairperson of the non-aligned movement, and really one doesn't want to talk of Iran in the same breath as North Korea, because North Korea doesn't enjoy the kind of, if you like, support in the global south. So I think Iran has a case to answer, and the sooner it starts answering the case, I think the better it would be in terms of its own, if you like, being heard by the council, and also countries having less concerns about what's happening in the country. Mind you, the main reason why the mandate was recreated was because since 2005, Iran has refused to receive any thematic rapporteurs into the country. And the reason why the previous mandate was wound down was because Iran gave open invitation, standing invitation to all rapporteurs, and some went to the country. So essentially, special procedures and collaboration with them is seen as the litmus test of how a country cooperates with the UN human rights mechanisms. I understand there is going to be a resolution on the mandate. I am not party to the debates and discussions amongst member states on this subject. My duty is to report to them. Therefore, nobody has shared with me or nobody will share with me a draft resolution that they will be discussing. It's up to member states to frame it, formulate it, and vote upon it. Well, my statement to them would be that the UN hasn't abandoned them. The UN mechanisms are there to cooperate with the countries, of course, but also to ensure that people without a voice do get heard as well. So the special procedures are specially set up as independent mechanisms to be able to reach out to individuals whose rights have been violated, so they can get the attention of the world community and move towards remedy and redress. So as my reports have documented, regardless of cooperation of the country concerned, it has been possible to give a voice to the voiceless, been possible to document their suffering or their alleged suffering and violations, and have been able to bring them before the world body. And of course, the government of Iran has, on occasion, even responded favorably to some of these issues. You will recall last year, this time, there was a huge issue about Pastor Yusuf Nadakani's situation. And of course, in the debate, Mr. Larijani responded to this. And I'm happy to note that since that time, he has been released. And there have been other occasions when UN special procedures have raised issue with the government of Iran. There has been some sort of favorable responses. So I think so long as the mandate exists, so long as there is information coming out of Iran, so long as the Council can debate issues on Iran, I think people have hope that their grievances will be heard, and perhaps down the line, the government of Iran will also give them remedy.